I'll see you after the news.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. After a very wet start to the year, the weekend promises much drier conditions. It's also going to be turning a little bit colder. We're losing low pressure systems and replacing them with an area of high pressure that's likely to last for most of next week, bringing a lot of dry weather. A lot of dry weather, but it's not completely dry. Still pretty wet out there this evening over parts of northeast Scotland, some heavy showers over the Northern Isles, and there will be some damp and drizzly conditions affecting central and eastern England, and showers continuing to affect West Wales and Cornwall. But for many, it will turn dry and clear and cold. Touch of frost likely, particularly from northern England across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So yes, a cold start to the weekend. Could be some stubborn fog patches in southwest Scotland, northwest England. Will be quite a grey day, I fancy, over parts of eastern England. A bit dank and drizzly, but thankfully not much in the way of heavy rainfall. And for many, certainly in the west, we'll see quite a bit of weak winter sunshine, which will struggle to lift those temperatures to about 5 to 8 Celsius, so round average for the time of year, but turning cold quickly on Saturday night. Another frosty start across the north on Sunday. Still quite cloudy at times in the east, but I'm more optimistic for a bit more sunshine coming through on Sunday. So for most, a dry and a bright day with some sunny spells, but it will be cold and it will feel even colder with this brisk wind across eastern and southern England. Goodbye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
It's 8 o'clock from the world headquarters of GB News. This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. May I wish you a very happy new year. After a policy-free speech, can we believe a word that Keir Starmer says? As his popularity plummets, is it time to call out veganism for what it actually is, an eating disorder? And following the Jeffrey Epstein sex row, is it time for King Charles to dump Prince Andrew out of the royal family once and for all? This is Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, my fabulous Friday friends, radio and newspaper legend Mike Porky Parry and fearless journalist and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci. And we'll be keeping their microphones live during my big opinions, so that's quite dangerous, isn't it? Also on tonight's show, Labour policy guru and Starmer superfan, if there is one, Paul Richards. The author of a brand new book on the vegan diet, Ed Winters. And one of the most respected royal journalists in the country, ex-BBC star Jenny Bond. She is still Jenny from the block. Plus, we'll bring reaction to the breaking news that former Energy Minister Chris Skidmore is going to stand down as a Tory MP in a row over oil and gas, creating yet another by-election nightmare for Rishi Sunak. Plus, my Friday big opinion is on the way. Find out why I've decided to transition to become a woman. You heard me right. First, the news headlines and the very masculine Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. I'm Sam Francis in the GB newsroom. The headlines at 8. Flooding across parts of England has been described as pure hell. That's as hundreds of warnings remain in place across the country in the wake of Storm Henk. In Nottinghamshire, a senior councillor has said some residents have been affected by floodwaters 3 times in just 3 months. More than 1,000 properties across the country remain flooded after the heavy downpours this week. It comes after Labour says that Rishi Sunak is asleep at the wheel over his handling of the floods. But Floods Minister Robbie Moore says the government has provided enough money for prevention.
Of course, always more to do, but I know how hard local authorities are working with the Environment Agency. We have experienced a huge amount of rain which has fallen, as you will see, right across the country, not only here in Nottinghamshire, but down in the Severn Valley and Severn Trent areas, but also down in Gloucestershire. We are, as a government, in contact with the Environment Agency, working closely with local authorities, making sure that we are providing as much support to residents, to businesses that have been impacted, and that's exactly why we are out and about.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is facing another by-election as MP Chris Skidmore has announced he will resign as soon as possible. The former Energy Minister plans to step down when Parliament returns next week because of new legislation for oil and gas drilling, which he says is wrong and will cause future harm. The government, though, says that the planned expansion of new fossil fuels in the North Sea is vital to achieve energy security plans. The NatWest chairman is rowing back on the comments he made on the radio this morning when he suggested that it was easy to buy a house. Sir Howard Davies told the BBC those wishing to get on the property ladder need to just save their money. He now says, though, that he recognises the challenges to owning a home and he will reflect when what he called easier access to mortgages. Data from Halifax, meanwhile, shows that house prices have shot up by nearly £5,000 within the last year, with the cost of an average home equating to around 8.5 years of a buyer's salary. Local residents in Hull told GB News they feel let down.
We need more houses and like bungalows and that for adapted people, you know, for disabled.
I've got a few friends who are trying to get onto the property for the first time and they're telling me it's difficult. Just to try and save the initial 10% or even sometimes 5%.
I definitely think that the new homes should be more affordable to the average working family because they seem to start off at £250,000.
A senior leader of the NHS says that the combination of strike action and rising cases of the flu is creating a perfect storm for the struggling health service. Sir Julian Hartley's comments come as junior doctors in England continue their 6-day strike over pay and conditions. It's the longest industrial action in NHS history. Figures published today show the number of flu patients in England jumped by more than a third over the Christmas period, while COVID numbers are also increasing. Sir Julian said severe and long-standing staff shortages have led to low staff morale, as heavy workloads also take their toll. Ofsted inspections will restart in schools from the 22nd of this month. The announcement comes after they were halted to ensure inspectors received mental health training. Ofsted's new chief inspector said a few days ago that the inspection process needs to be far more empathetic. That's after various complaints from within the education sector. A man who's suspected of faking his own death has been extradited from Scotland to the US. Nicholas Rossi is wanted for allegedly raping a woman in 2008. He was arrested in Glasgow in 2021, but claimed it was a case of mistaken identity. He said instead that he was an Irish orphan named Arthur Knight. After a long legal battle in the Scottish courts, the 36-year-old has now been ordered to face the charges against him in the States. And the actor David Soul has died at the age of 80. He was best known for his role in the classic TV series Starsky and Hutch, which followed two streetwise police officers. The series ran for 4 seasons, along with novels and even a video game. Soul relocated to the UK in later years before his co-star reprised their roles in a 2004 Hollywood film, which starred Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson. This is GB News. We're across the UK, on TV, in your car, digital radio and on your smart speaker. Now, though, more from Mark.
Great job, Sam. We'll see you in an hour's time. Welcome to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. A happy new year to one and all. I have missed you hugely. Ooh. After another policy-free speech, can we believe a word that Keir Starmer says? Following the Jeffrey Epstein sex row, is it time for King Charles to kick Prince Andrew out of the royal family altogether? And as its popularity plummets, is it time to call out veganism for what it actually is? An eating disorder. No. All of that plus much more on Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, and you can hear the voices of my top pundits. You'll meet them in a moment. Ooh. But first, my big opinion. Now, Schindler's List was good to be on. Jeffrey Epstein's list, not so much. The billionaire paedophile has been linked to a range of celebrities, including Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew and Leonardo DiCaprio, in court documents released this week. Rumours abound that the well-connected businessman procured sex for his famous friends, with even Professor Stephen Hawking being mentioned. Presumably, he liked young women to sit on his keyboard. One famous name not involved is Boris Johnson, who's said to be relieved not to be on the list, as well as a bit offended. I mean, an invitation would have been nice. Meanwhile, it looks to be the beginning of the end for Prince Andrew, as the gossip around his friendship with Epstein reaches fever pitch. In his ill-fated interview with Emily Maitlis on Newsnight, he famously said he doesn't sweat due to a war injury. Well, all of that's changed. He's now sweating more than Wayne Rooney on Mastermind. Meanwhile, massive banker Sir Howard Davies, chairman of NatWest, who should have gone after the Nigel Farage debanking scandal, has proudly announced that it's not difficult for people to get on the housing ladder. Right. They just have to save, apparently, Stephanie Tetchy. Easy for him to say on his multi-million-pound salary. I mean, Mike Parry knows what I'm talking about there.
Well, it was quite easy.
I'll tell you what, Mike will tell us how it's done. I'll be honest, these people really do live on another planet, don't they? But help is at hand, folks. We now have the perfect answer to getting hold of a property. Forget about your credit rating or a deposit. Go gay! That's right, it's been announced this week that Manchester will see the first housing development for LGBTQ plus people. That's gay people, lesbians, gender-neutral and trans folk. This is, of course, another example of wokeism's love affair with segregation. This time, what I'm calling sexual apartheid, giving people a special building of their own to live in based upon who they fancy or the gender by which they identify. Putting certain groups of people into certain buildings. This is progress, is it?
Shocking.
Well, it's not, is it? I'm shocked.
Absolutely
Stephanie's shocked. Michael is shocked as well. Well, I've only got one question. These gay flats, will they be 1 up, 2 down? Now, I'll be honest, I'd quite like to get into the property business myself. Those flats in Manchester look lovely.
But the problem is this. Take a look at this photograph of me. It's not going to happen, is it? I got no chance of getting into those LGBTQ plus flats. Male, pale and stale. But let me introduce you to my brand new identity. Jennifer Dolan. Isn't she gorgeous?
She's a stunner.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Even Mike Parry's impressed.
She's gorgeous.
I was going to say.
Delighted to say.
Got time for a drink after the show?
Yeah.
Let's talk. Bit of horizontal refreshment, Mike Parry.
You need to be my new BFF, Jennifer.
There you go. Well, let me tell you, I pick up the keys to my new flat on Tuesday. Now, Mike Parry loves this story. 16-year-old Luke Littler wowed darts fans this week by advancing in the World Championships. But to be honest, it's lucky that he didn't go all the way in the final, as it was already way past his bedtime. The talented teenager has scooped an incredible £200,000 in prize money, which we're told will be wisely invested in new trainers, Alton Towers tickets and a family pack of hula hoops.
That's a bit harsh.
And finally, speaking of harsh, Mike Parry, the British Film Institute is to issue trigger warnings at the start of the iconic James Bond films, saying that they may offend viewers. Well, frankly, Stephanie Tetchy...
alone.
Tetchy is not happy.
Alone.
I disagree with Stephanie. I applaud the move, which is why here on Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, we've given that film franchise a politically correct makeover. So here is my top 10 countdown, starting at number 10, woke Bond movies. First up, at number 10, on She/Her Majesty's Secret Service. In at number 9, The Living Gaylights.
Oh, no. That's
Number
wrong.
8, Licence to Kill, TERFs. In at number 7, you'll love this one, Dr. No, White People Allowed. Number 6, woke Bond films, The Man Who Identifies as a Woman with the Golden Gun.
Oh.
Is that gun natural? In at number 5, Thunder Nobles. Number 4, Goldfinger, but only if you ask permission.
Bit harsh.
Number 3, The Spy Who Loved Me Then Left Me for Someone of His Own Gender.
Oh.
Mike Parry's been there. The runner-up for Your Eyes Only and The Doctor Who's Transitioning You. And last but not least, in at number 1, Die Another Gay.
Oh, no, that's wrong.
And that was my Friday Big Opinion.
Oh, gosh.
Die Another Gay. You don't want to know the ones that did not make the cut. Let's get reaction from my brilliant Friday friends tonight. Radio and newspaper legend Mike Porky Parry and fearless journalist and broadcaster, the ultimate dropper of truth bombs, Stephanie Tetchy.
Oh, I love that.
Now, guys, that's what's happened this week.
Yeah.
But in the last couple of hours, in an extraordinary developing story, Chris Skidmore, a former energy minister, has sensationally resigned as a Tory MP over Rishi Sunak's plans to issue new oil and gas licences. He's called it a tragedy that the UK has lost its climate leadership. His shock resignation means the Tories face a by-election in his Kingswood constituency, where his majority is just 11,000. Stephanie, another by-election nightmare for Sunak.
Another nail in Rishi's coffin, to be honest, Mark. I just think... the point where Rishi is, he needs a super strong team right now, and he doesn't need people of his own party coming up against him, and especially on green issues. You know, like Sir Keir Starmer has done a brilliant job in trying to convince some of the right to become left. When it comes to things on climate and green issues, this is where Rishi really needs to shine and perhaps connect with the left. And he's not doing a good job of that. And especially as now you're losing one of your leading voices on green issues, it's not a good look for Rishi.
Chris Skidmore, Mike Parry, another eco-bedwetter, or is he right to make a stand?
Well, I mean, he's as wet as a wet towel Tory, isn't he? And frankly, I've never heard of him, neither has anybody else.
Yeah.
He'd already announced he was standing down at the next election anyway, and suddenly comes up and says that, you know, I'm now on a point of principle because we're going to drill more in the North Sea. I can't stand this. I'm stepping down. Now, he was once a junior energy secretary, right? Can I tell you this? I was very interested to see a new report out this week to say that UK nuclear power has shrunk to its lowest output since the 1980s. Right, this week. That's a report this week.
Shocking.
Now, if he was in any way an energy minister, he was also, I found out, Minister of State for Science in 2019.
You know more about him than his own mother, by the way. You're like his stalker.
I've researched this guy because I think he's such a pathetic individual. If he had those responsibilities in government but felt that we shouldn't drill in the North Sea, Why didn't he focus on why nuclear energy in this country is at its lowest productivity since the 80s? Because we all know nuclear energy is safe, it's efficient, and it will save us from having to rely on people like the Middle East and Putin to fire up our houses.
And the Lib Dems have been chanting about the fact that they cancelled nuclear in the coalition government in 2010.
Because it wouldn't be built soon enough. It would have been built by now.
Yes, exactly right.
But
Stephanie.
Mike, dear Mike, if he didn't resign...
Don't be too nice to him.
Oh,
It makes him, his ego
If he
explode.
didn't resign, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. We wouldn't know about this bill that Rishi's due to sign next week. So maybe by him resigning, actually, it puts it in the public periphery and we can discuss it.
So do you think Skidmore is a man of principle,
yes,
then?
Yes, I do. I think he's actually standing up for his rights and he's got integrity.
And Rishi Sunak got the skids now, hasn't he?
I don't agree. I think Skidmore's a juice head. And my definition of a juice head... A juice head.
OK.
Right.
Yeah. Glad you said that right.
My definition of a juice head is somebody who just seizes the opportunity to give himself a few lines on page 13 of a newspaper nobody buys to try and make himself look like a man of principle.
Don't be so rude about The Guardian.
But he's not a man of principle. He's a guy who's taking some weird opportunity to make a point. But, Steph, I would say this. After COP28, the guy who led COP28, the leader of Dubai, made it clear that if we give up drilling for oil and gas, we will all return to living in caves.
Well, that is the worry.
And that's the truth. So why Skidmore thinks that he can jump on a bandwagon of no more oil, I've no idea.
But, you know, he knows more about this than either me or you, Mike.
I don't
so
agree.
Maybe we should trust his opinion a bit?
I don't agree. I think his head's been turned by the old green lobby who say, you know, we shouldn't be drilling for oil and gas. The world would stop if we didn't.
But Rishi must have had some confidence in him.
Well, I tell you something, let's hope that we're not all living in caves in the next few years. Someone that definitely won't is Luke Littler, who got to the final of the World Darts Championships. Mike, you know your onions. You covered the sport pages of The Sun in the 80s and 90s. You're the co-founder of Talk Sport Radio as well. This guy is a bit special, isn't he?
This guy's absolutely special. Do you know what was the sheer irony of what happened? On the day Luke Littler was in the World Darts final at the age of 16, Wayne Rooney was sacked as manager of Birmingham. And Wayne Rooney was 16 when he scored that classic goal against Arsenal, which put him on the world stage. Everybody knew about Wayne Rooney for one magnificent sporting act, scoring that goal against David Seaman. The world knew about Luke Littler because he was entering the stage at Ali Pali, world champion. On the same day, Rooney's career ended in football as Luke Littler started.
And how old is Wayne? He's probably like...
38. OK, so there you go.
He looks about 60. But Stephanie, the real scandal, and I know Mike's not happy about this, prize money, £200,000.
Oh, gosh.
But he's going to take home about £78,000. No, he won't. Sorry, he's going to be taxed about 78 grand by HMRC. It's this proof, isn't it, that taxes are too high in this country?
I think they are too high, and especially when, you know, we're living in a cost of living crisis, we want to kind of keep a bit more of our money rather than it going to...
Yeah. Well, is that right? He's going to keep just over half of the prize money,
I'm very surprised at that story and that statistic because darts is run by a guy called Barry Hearn. Barry Hearn is a brilliant businessman who literally has put snooker and darts and boxing on the world stage. But Barry started off as an accountant, OK? That's what he did in Romford with Steve Davis, OK? Now, if it was me... all that money would by now, that prize money, would be in the Cayman Islands or the Isle of Man.
But Mike, he's only...
Monaco.
I know, but what I'm saying is, somebody should have been a bit more on the ball and you know, advised him where to put that 200,000 quid.
What's the point in working hard and doing well in this country if half of it's taken by the tax money?
Well, his is 1/3, isn't it? Which is about right at the moment. It'd be a lot more, I think, if you know, the people who want progressive tax get involved. But what I'm saying is, so, I mean, funny enough, just to get back to the simile with Wayne Rooney again, when Wayne started, he didn't know how much he was getting paid. You see what I mean?
Now, are you talking about Wayne Rooney so much because you are his biographer and you're keen to sell copies of your best-selling book, which is called Rooney Tunes?
Rooney Tunes, thank you. It's a bestseller, and I wasn't going to bring that up, but if anybody wants it, HarperCollins, no problem. But no, what what I was going to say is that when you're that age and when you're suddenly conquering the world,
16,
you couldn't care less about how much you're getting paid.
So true.
You just want to do it and throw the darts.
Listen, I don't want to get in trouble with producer Mark, but listen, 16, is it going to go to his head, this lad?
I think it is, and I'm worried about him. I'm worried that he's going to be another Emma Raducanu, where she regrets having all this success too much, because what's going to happen is you're going to get your 15 minutes of fame, and as a sports person, that is not ideal.
And also, Mike, Mike, I'm in so much trouble. You were a top reporter, doorstepping celebrities. Is it right that this lad's girlfriend has been hounded by the press, you know? He's just a kid, isn't he?
Look, he's the most interesting 16-year-old in the world now, because the numbers for the darts multiplied by a factor of 4 when he got to the final. How about that? So you're into, like, 2 million, you know, where you used to be in 500,000, all that kind of stuff. Very famous boy. I don't quite agree with Steph, although I respect everything she says, because she knows the way the world works.
She knows her onions.
But I think this boy is so balanced, and the way he's spoken, both in the run-up to the final and the aftermath of the final, I don't see him falling and crashing and burning. I see him going forward.
So he's going to win stuff, and how much money is he going to make in his career?
Oh, millions, multi-millions,
Really?
multi-millions.
And what do you think? Is he going to make cash?
I think he'll make cash, but whether he will still be a good sportsman, that is going to be
Oh, I think he will. I think he's shown all the attributes of being a good sportsman.
Friday Night Chaos, always live at 8 o'clock with me, Mark Dolan. Coming up after another policy-free speech, can we believe a word that Keir Starmer says? We'll hear from a top Labour Party guru. You are watching Friday Night Live on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I. So you want higher taxes? Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Lovely to have your company. Now, coming up as its popularity plummets, is it time to call out veganism for what it actually is, an eating disorder? But first, following yet another Keir Starmer speech yesterday in which we're left none the wiser about what he would actually do as Prime Minister, can we really believe a word that this man says? Well, I'll bring my pundits in on this shortly, but first, let's speak to former top advisor to the Labour Party and friend of the show, Paul Richards. Paul, Happy New Year to you. There was no content in that speech. Do you think that Keir Starmer is insulting the British public?
I don't think it's fair to say there was no content. The poor bloke, every time he gets criticised for not saying what Labour would do, he stands up and makes a speech about what Labour would do. It's backed up by lots of policy documents. If you could be bothered to go online and read them, honestly, there's tons of stuff there. And the Labour Party is shaping up a manifesto it's going to put to the people as soon as we get a general election. I think people are desperate for an election now. They want to have this debated in the public, and they want to have their vote put in the box so they can decide who governs the country.
But all he's going to do is get rid of tax breaks for private schools and then scare non-DOMs away. Yeah. How's that going to pay for the NHS, more police and this wonderful new Britain he's going to create?
Well, the big point he made in the speech was that you've got to have economic growth. And I think this is the thing that everyone now is focused on, is how you grow the economy. There's billions of pounds of investment just tied up in institutions, companies, foreign investors who are not investing in the UK because of this current government. And they're waiting for a new government to come in so they can see stability and they can see that their money will be well invested. The money's waiting. What we're waiting for is an election, and why Sunak said he's not going to have an election now till the autumn, maybe even November. Why wait? If he thinks he can win, then surely he should have had the election in May, as predicted.
You might have heard my top pundit, Mike Parry, chuckling there. I'll bring him in just a second. When you said that he's going to have economic growth, that's his policy. First of all, every government wants economic growth, but it's hard to make happen. That's like me telling my wife she's going to be married to Brad Pitt. This is not content. It's not a policy to say we will have economic growth.
Well, there's lots of policies underpinning that in terms of investment in life sciences.
What, is he going to cut taxes? Because that makes the economy grow. Is he going to do that?
Well, I think that you heard Rachel say that her instinct is that working people are being taxed too much. And I think that is where Labour is at now. There have been 25 tax rises since this government came in. And I think most people feel that the tax burden is too high. It's the highest tax burden since the war. Nationally, and individually we feel it too. So yeah, why not? I mean, Labour had growth in every quarter it was in government last time round. So this is not something that's a pipe dream. It is doable, and we've seen in other countries too. If you get a government that invests, and in every part of the nation and in every sector, then you do get the growth that pays for the schools and the hospitals that we all want.
OK, well, let's bring my top pundits in, if I can. Paul Richards. We have Fleet Street icon, the brilliant Mike Parry, and fearless journalist and broadcaster Stephanie Tetchy. Mike, were you convinced by what you heard from the Leader of the Opposition yesterday?
Well, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear one single policy that's going to change the world or make it different to what's going on now. And Paul, honest to God, the idea that a Labour government will go for growth by cutting taxes, that's cloud cuckoo land. Every Labour government since the war has ended up bankrupting the country because they don't understand that some people in our society have to create wealth, and that can support our society. All they do is draw money out, draw money out, draw money out till we go bankrupt. They don't know how to create wealth. They have no idea how to make an economy work. They just want to give money away. They want to redistribute money from those who make it to those who don't deserve it.
Well, that was a nice speech. I don't know if there was a question in there somewhere.
No, I was knocking you. You were saying, oh, great policy announcements yesterday by Keir Starmer. What policy announcement, apart from, the generic, we'll go for growth, we'll be a kinder political society, we will have a nicer form of politics. It was all drivel.
Well, I think we could all do with a nicer form of politics, and there's no harm in him talking about a bit of hope as well. There's a
well, Jeremy Corbyn used to say that.
Running through the... Yes, but he was not a credible leader. And,
I thought he was more credible.
Stephanie, you think that Corbyn was a better leader of the Labour Party than Keir Starmer?
Jeremy Corbyn, Tony Blair, I can follow them as a Labour supporter and know what they stand for. I know what their vision is. There is trust there. With Sir Keir Starmer, there's no trust there because he talks a good talk, but can he walk a good walk? No. He talks about economic growth. That's a very strong point for Rishi. So what else has he got to offer? There's no substance to when he speaks. Where when I used to listen to Jeremy Corbyn or Tony Blair, I was convinced that they could actually get the job done.
Well, certainly one of them did, and the other one didn't so much. But, I mean, I think Starmer is growing into this role, and he has got a record of public service, don't forget. He has run public services, and he has delivered change within those. Unlike Sunak, who I don't think has ever worked in public services before becoming Prime Minister. And most MPs have never had a proper job at all. I mean, at least Keir Starmer has had a proper job and done something with that.
He hasn't had a proper job. He was a human rights lawyer. So that means, as a human rights lawyer, he's going to try and give more advantages to people who want to come to this country. His deputy, Angela Rayner, is incredibly quiet at the moment, and she has made a vow that she's going to look after working people by giving them more money. And the guy in charge of energy, Ed Miliband, wants to spend £28 billion a year for 5 years to revolutionise the country. It's madness.
More than anything, you know, like, morale is so low in this country after 14 years with the Conservatives. Sir Keir Starmer says that he wants to bring back hope, but I'm not sure how he's going to bring back this hope and how he's going to give us a future. This is what I'm on the fence about.
I mean, the point is, Paul Richards, that Keir Starmer doesn't have to do much to become Prime Minister. Just let the Tories unravel. Do you think that policy is going to work, or will we get more detail from the Leader of the Opposition?
Well, he's set out these 5 missions. There's going to be a lot more detail this year. And, of course, you're going to see a manifesto when the election's called, and that will contain crunchy policies that people can debate in public and decide whether they want or not in an election. We've got these by-elections coming out too, where the people in those constituencies will have their say, and we'll see some hard numbers from those about how the country is feeling, about whether it feels hopeful about a Labour government or not, including the by-election that's been declared just today. And as the election year goes on, these things will be tested and scrutinised.
Paul, I think that if you were advising Starmer, he'd be further ahead in the polls with the right policies. Why, for example, is Stop the Boats not on his list of 5 pledges?
Well, Labour has got a policy, I think a far more workable policy, on tackling the gangs and stopping the boats ever even reaching the coast. If you listen to what Yvette Cooper's talking about, you know, there's actually a much better plan there of smashing the gangs.
But it's not in the top 5. Listen, before I let you go, Paul, brilliant to have you back on the show. Look forward to many on-air adventures together in 2024. Before I leave you, very, very sad news today. The political activist, I suppose, what can you say? He's a big political sort of guy and a very, very famous man for being married to Kate Garraway. Derek Draper has died, sadly, from illness related to COVID at the age of 56. I understand that you knew Derek.
Well, we were friends from way back in the 1980s in Manchester. He was a famous figure in student circles even back then. A huge figure, I mean, larger than life. He dominated every room he was in. He could annoy you, he could frustrate you, he could make you laugh. You would do what he said. He was very influential on the creation of New Labour. And getting Tony Blair elected, but he was friends with Gordon Brown. He also was friends with people like Ken Livingstone and Len McCluskey. You know, he was a real behind-the-scenes kind of guy, and he didn't want to do anything for himself. It wasn't about him being elected as an MP, or he didn't want to be world king. You know, he wanted to help Labour over the line. And he never lost that kind of northern brash, kind of, cheeky chap kind of figure about him. He was just absolutely brilliant fun, and he will be sorely missed. And the manner of his going, 56 is no age after 2 years of debilitating illness following COVID. You know, it's a really sad way for somebody who was so full of life and so loud and brash to go. So I think we're all feeling a little bit sadder for his passing today.
A real tragedy. May he rest in peace. And, of course, our sympathies to Kate Garraway and Derek's family. Thank you so much for that, Paul Richards. We'll catch up soon. Lots more to come, folks, including, as its popularity plummets, is it time to call out veganism for what it actually is, an eating disorder? And should King Charles kick Prince Andrew out of the royal family altogether? That's next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Newsread.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Coming up later, following the Jeffrey Epstein sex row, is it time for King Charles to dump Prince Andrew out of the royal family once and for all? But earlier we asked you on Twitter, after another speech thin on detail, can you believe a word that Keir Starmer says? Well, the results are in. And it's not good reading for the leader of the opposition. 91% of you have said they cannot believe a word that Keir says. But let's be honest, he'll still win the next election. Such is the parlous state of British politics. Or will he? That's a debate for another day. But now, has the vegan bubble burst? According to figures by consumer intelligence company NIQ, in the last 12 months, UK sales of chilled meat alternatives fell by 16.8% in January 2023, and frozen meat alternatives fell by 13.5%. Companies including Oatly, Nestle, Innocent and Heck Sausages have recently withdrawn various vegan products from the UK, whilst a recent Waitrose survey highlighted a resurgence in the popularity of dishes such as shepherd's pie, macaroni cheese and chicken Kiev. Yum. So, as thousands of Brits go plant-based for the month in a tradition known as Veganuary, a new book is out celebrating the vegan diet. It's called How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. Well, I'm delighted to say its author is Ed Winters, and he joins us now. Ed, lovely to have you on the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you, Mark.
Listen, what are the most powerful arguments for veganism?
Well, I think there's a number, antibiotic resistance, so reducing antibiotics in our food chain, trying to prevent infectious
Because when you
diseases.
eat a cow that's been injected with antibiotics, you're eating antibiotics.
Not necessarily. It's not quite as simple as that, but antibiotics, when they're used in the farming system, cause bacteria to become resistant to those antibiotics.
Right.
So it's not necessarily that it's in the food we're consuming, but of course the knock-on effect is that we can come into contact with resistant bacteria. There's also infectious diseases, bird flu, swine flu. There's the environmental harm. There's some of the health consequences related to certain animal product consumption. And for me, the big argument is reducing animal suffering, harm and death. So taking a stand against the unnecessary use and abuse of animals.
Now, I've got no doubt there are some great recipes in your book, and if people were eating avocados and almonds and salads and courgettes, I can agree it's a healthy diet.
Right.
But the problem is busy vegans don't eat those foods, do they? What they eat is the kind of instant soya burger, and they're eating just bowls of pasta and, you know, hummus sandwiches, none of which is all that nutritious.
Well, that's not strictly true. I mean, firstly, hummus sandwiches can be very nutritious, as can whole grain pasta dishes. And even when you look at some of the plant-based alternatives, they may not be the healthiest foods you can consume, but when studies compare them to their meat counterparts, they're not only more sustainable, but they are healthier as well.
It's all processed, though, isn't it? I mean, vegan bacon, I was just in the local M&S the other day, and the first ingredient is water, the second ingredient is sunflower oil.
Well, yeah, and bacon's a class 1 carcinogen. You know, vegan bacon isn't meant to be a health food. It's supposed to replicate and be an alternative to a class 1 carcinogen.
Can Michael, just jump in here, Ed?
Can I just warn you, Michael's just had a steak.
But I also know that Michael likes vegan
Ed, can I ask you a very
sandwiches.
serious question, please?
So
A very serious question, because you're an expert on this. Is it not true that the human body, and I've read a lot of reports on it, needs protein, and protein comes from meat? And if you deny a human body that protein, strange things happen to the human body. So veganism, I've got a lot of respect for people who want to be vegans, who want to eat that way, but I do think that, you know, there is almost a kind of, you know, bullying type aspect to you must become a vegan to be a good people. But I do think that you are denying your body protein, which is absolutely necessary to the human form.
But all protein comes from plants. Animals get protein from consuming plants. Even carnivores get it from consuming herbivores.
Absolutely, and that's why cows have plenty of protein in them. And then when you eat a steak, you ingest protein.
But you can get protein from plants. All plant protein originates from plants.
You'd have to eat millions of plants, honestly, Ed. You'd have to eat millions of plants.
I mean, how does a broccoli compare to, let's say, a pork sausage in terms of protein?
Or a steak.
Well, they're not necessarily comparable, but broccoli isn't a protein source. But when you compare things like legumes, like soy, and even seitan, which is a plant-based protein, they have comparable, sometimes even higher amounts of protein per gram compared to certain animal products. The point you're making is completely mute. You can get protein in a plant-based diet.
No, it's not mute.
It's very hard to mute. You can't mute Mike Parry.
But
I've tried.
You're not arguing against me. You're arguing against the NHS, the British Dietetic Association. You're arguing against the largest bodies of medical and health authorities on the planet.
Ed, wouldn't you say that veganism has lost its way in the sense now it's just become more of a fad and it's just cool to say, I'm a vegan, where people are not actually looking at, you know, the health benefits anymore. Everyone's just jumping on this train of being a vegan. Like, to be honest, I think, wouldn't it be better to be a vegetarian? Because now people are talking about all these ultra-processed foods, fake burgers, fake bacon, which is not good for our health. So wouldn't it be better just to be a vegetarian? And are we losing our way when it comes to veganism?
Well, when it comes to people's health, I'm sure all 4 of us would agree on the panel that people have the right to their own bodies. And as long as they know that, obviously, eating a kale, chickpea and sweet potato curry is healthier than eating a processed plant-based burger, I think people have the right to make that decision. The important thing to recognise is, again, even these processed plant-based alternatives, studies show time and time again they are better, healthier, more sustainable than their animal-based counterparts. So making that swap straight away is a healthier decision, but I agree. Eating more whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, legumes is even better for us.
But we're omnivores, aren't we? So we've been eating a mixture of vegetables and meat
since cavemen.
Right, for thousands of years.
Had to.
And we've evolved quite strongly in that department, wouldn't you say?
Well, we've evolved as being opportunistic scavengers. We ate what we could to survive.
But would we have done that? Would we have done that without meat, Michael?
We killed animals because we needed it. We knew right from the birth of man that sustainability in the human form was the food chain, and the food chain involved us killing animals and eating that.
Let me respond to that point you just made.
Yes, please, yeah.
At that time, we ate what we had to survive. Society has changed and evolved in a number of different ways, and what we have now is information and accessibility to foods that our ancestors never did. Our ancestors used to kill one another, rape one another to survive and to prosper, but we would never condone such a thing now because we live in a modern world where we have the choice and accessibility to do other things instead.
What about the fact that medics recommend people on a vegan diet take supplements? That's not a ringing endorsement. endorsement, is it?
Well, most people take supplements, whether they be fish oil, of course.
I don't.
But even, well, perhaps you should. Vitamin D in the UK is essential for all of us.
No,
vegan
can
and
I just say,
non-vegan
Mike
alike.
Parry's body's a temple. No problems there. In fact, I've got a down payment on his kidneys.
Just to bring it back to the point you were saying, the animals in our food chain are fortified, they're supplemented. So actually, we do consume a lot of supplements even when we eat animals. It's just they're filtered through an animal to begin with. So vegans just take a B12 supplement, from the source, which is the supplement itself, and then they stop animals from being forced into gas chambers for a nutrient that we can get from supplements instead.
Can I just flip the coin for a moment? Supposing the argument was the other way around, and I said to you, look, I think you should be a vegetarian, but eat false vegetables, not real vegetables. You see what I mean? Because you want us to eat false meat, not real meat. So if I said to you, look, here's a cabbage, but it's a false cabbage, how would you feel about that if I was finding a way to produce a false cabbage, not a real cabbage?
Well, I mean, firstly, you don't have to eat plant-based alternatives if you don't want to. Just eat whole plant foods instead. I know that you are quite fond of the vegan sausage, of course. I've seen you eating that sausage about quite nicely. But the point is,
couldn't tell the difference,
reason that we have these plant-based alternatives is because there are more ethical decisions. So if I eat vegan bacon, vegan sausage, vegan burger, what that means is I'm no longer paying for animals to be mutilated, forcibly
But why do they call it bacon and sausage? It's not, is it? Why do they call it vegan sausage and vegan bacon?
Sausage refers to the shape.
It's not... Yeah, exactly, but it's...
Cylindrical shape.
But isn't that conning people? If you say this is a vegan sausage, it's not a vegan sausage,
It's a meat-free sausage. So when people see it, they go, that is a sausage made from something that isn't from an animal.
Let me
which
tell
makes
you,
it more ethical.
you don't want to see Mike's sausage. Ed, can I tell you that you spoke very well, and your book is out now. Very interesting read it is too. It is called How to Argue with a Meat Eater and Win Every Time. It's enjoying rave reviews. We'll catch up with you soon. OK, folks, coming up following the Jeffrey Epstein sex row, is it time for King Charles to dump Prince Andrew out of the royal family once and for all? We'll debate that with the extraordinary, the brilliant Jenny Bond. You're watching Friday Night Live on GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's an extraordinary cache of court documents reveal Prince Andrew's connection to and friendship with disgraced paedophile billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Should King Charles dump his brother out of the royal family once and for all? Let's get the views now of one of the best connected royal journalists in the country, former top BBC correspondent and television personality Jenny Bond. Jenny, welcome to the show. Happy New Year. What is the worst-case scenario for Prince Andrew? What is the greatest sanction his brother, King Charles, can deploy?
Well, you see, I'm not sure that much more can happen to Prince Andrew, who we have to remember has not been found guilty of any wrongdoing and who denies all wrongdoing. He has been stripped of his HRH title. He has been sacked by his late mother, basically, from all royal duties. He's been stripped of his military appointments. He no longer has charity patronages. They were taken away from him. But he is a blood brother. He is the king's little brother. So it's all very well to see these headlines, you know, time to chop him out or kick him out or whatever. I don't really know what people mean. You know, this is a family. It's just not a monarchy. It is a family. And there is, you know, there are connections. And Charles is a sentimental sort of old soul. You know, he's all kind of, you know, I think Charles really in another life with peace and love, man, you know, with smoking a joint, probably with flowers in his hair. You know, he wants peace. So I don't think he's looking to really kick his brother in the whatsits.
Andrew's home is the Royal Lodge. It's on the Windsor estate, Jenny, and it boasts 10 bedrooms. Should Andrew be turfed out of that accommodation at least?
Well, why? You know, I mean, he was given it on a very long lease, and he's put a certain amount of money into it. His security's been taken away, so he has to pay for it. Actually, his big brother pays for most of that. I mean, that's a possible sanction. But, I mean, do we want to see him living, I don't know, down the road in a terraced house? Well, perhaps that would please people. But I do emphasise, again, I haven't got a lot of time for Andrew. I think he's an arrogant, pompous man. And, you know, this stench of everything he's been involved with Epstein, whatever it is, a very bad friendship. For all that, I'm not sure that we can castigate him when he's not been proven guilty of anything.
Jenny, let me bring in my Friday friends, Mike Parry and Stephanie Tecci. Of course, Mike, you've covered the Royal Fleet in Fleet Street. Andrew used to be known as Randy Andy, didn't he? Has sex always been a problem for this reckless royal?
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say to Jenny is that I accept that you're being sympathetic. And Jenny, you know, you are one of the world's leading royal correspondents. You might know things about the royal family we don't. But do you not think, Jenny, that this report today has opened it all up again after the King Charles, tried to sort of bring him back into the fold over Christmas? Do you not think, Jenny, that over the years, as various women sort of grow up and become more mature, reports like this might come back again and again and again? So shouldn't the King Charles say, I've got to banish him?
Well, what do you mean, banish him?
Well, I mean, go and ask him to live somewhere else or not to be involved in any duties with the royal family ever again.
But how is that going to help?
Well, you could ban him.
What change is that going to make?
Stephanie, what you could do is the King could say, he's not coming round for Christmas dinner. I don't want to see him at Easter. As far as I'm concerned, he's not a member of the family anymore.
No,
absolutely.
The key word is family, Mark.
OK.
Through thick and thin.
But he's behaved so badly, Steph. He's behaved very badly.
Jenny, briefly, give me 20 seconds if you can. Tell me about Charles and Andrew. Are they friends? Do they get on? What does the King think of his brother?
I think he feels his brother is a load of trouble for him. They're not that close because there's a big age difference, 12 years, so they didn't really grow up together. But as I say, Charles is a man of great sentiment and loyalty, and I think he wishes for the family to be as harmonious as is possible. Very difficult in that family.
Jenny, always a thrill to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. The brilliant former royal correspondent Jenny Bond. Coming up this weekend on Mark Dolan tonight, I'm back. And the return of My Big Opinion and The Take at 10, as well as Common Sense political commentator Annunziata Rees-Mogg, the best Prime Minister we never had in Anne Widdecombe, and former Tory MP when they were good, Neil Parish. Next up, it's Patrick Christie's. What's happening, Patrick?
Prosecute junior doctors for patient deaths during the strikes. Should the Archbishop Welby use his £2.4 million inheritance to build a migrant hotel? I speak to the lawyer representing Reeva Steenkamp's family after Pistorius has been released. And I confronted the bankers, Mark.
Listen, the biggest bankers you'll ever meet. Thank you. Brilliant, brilliant Patrick Christie's. Thanks for watching Friday Night Live. Well done to Mark and the team and my excellent pundits tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. You're watching GB News, the People's Channel.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. After a very wet start to the year, the weekend promises much drier conditions. It's also going to be turning a little bit colder. We're losing low pressure systems and replacing them with an area of high pressure that's likely to last for most of next week, bringing a lot of dry weather. A lot of dry weather, but it's not completely dry. Still pretty wet out there this evening over parts of northeast Scotland, some heavy showers over the Northern Isles, and there will be some damp and drizzly conditions affecting central and eastern England, and showers continuing to affect West Wales and Cornwall. But for many, it will turn dry and clear and cold. Touch of frost likely, particularly from northern England across Scotland and Northern Ireland. So yes, a cold start to the weekend. Could be some stubborn fog patches in southwest Scotland, north